Thank you for tuning in to the Leadership Forum, a space where you will hear perspectives from global industry executives on human ingenuity and how they catalyzed it to unlock value and realize their organization's true potential. We will keep it real. We will hear what's worked well and learnings from instances where things could have worked better. I'm your host, Saquib, Vali, partner at Spiderworks and explorer. Say hi to the future, the fast-growing community highlighting the human side of ingenuity. Our guest today, Laura Salisbury. Laura is the CEO of Nucleus Independent Living, providing reliable attendance services that enable seniors and persons with physical disabilities remain living safely and independently in their own homes. Laura has built a career in health and community care for over 20 years, 11 of which were in various roles in the Mississauga Halt and Lynn. Laura is the recent recipient of the Canadian College of Health Leaders 2023 CEO Award of the Year, accomplishing in less than 3 what others may take a decade. That's quite an acknowledgement, Laura. Hey, welcome, Laura, and thank you for taking time out from your caring schedule. Laura, let's let our listeners hear in your voice how you would wish to introduce yourself. And as you do, take a moment somewhere in there to demystify, debunk something that we all get wrong about health and community care.
Thank you for having me. I'm actually really excited to do this podcast. I think sometimes we're challenged with being able to have a voice because of how things are misconstrued in the public forum these days. So I'm glad to have a record to set straight, so to speak. So I have been in healthcare for many years. What started me in this journey was my own, probably like a lot of us, our own personal experience, and it wasn't great. So I really saw it in myself that I wanted to be a part of the change, and probably would need to lead a lot of that change for a variety of reasons. And so I'm an accountant by background. But have been, I always say, very well trained by all of my people who I have come in contact over these last 20 years, who've been very patient with me to teach me, to help me understand so that I can, I hope, make a difference. And that's kind of what gets me excited every day, which is, what are we actually doing? So very action oriented. I would say the thing about community care that I think is sometimes misconstrued is that it's somehow less. It's somehow less than care you might receive in a long-term care home, or you might receive in other types of institutional care like complex continuing care or a hospital. The people who deliver care in people's homes are experts in their fields, come to their job every day with the goal of caring for people in their homes. It makes me think a lot about personal support workers through COVID, where they were the resource that remained in place every single day. That was often without great support from the rest of the health system. So I think that's one of the myths I'd like to challenge out there, which is the care that happens in people's homes is probably what matters the most to them, because it's what helps keep them in their communities for as long as they're able to stay and thrive and have a high quality of life where they want to age in place. So I think I'm going to leave you with that thought.
That's absolutely fantastic, and you're right. I mean, especially with the challenges that our healthcare is facing, I think without the support of community care, I'm not so sure if our hospitals and our healthcare system overall could continue. So it is critical, and thank you for saying that. Funny, you and I joined Nucleus at the same time, and I can vouch for every single word written in the description in your leadership award presentation. But the part I loved the most was you have a great sense of humor. And so tell me, how does that make you the leader you are?
We're in a really serious business. So I think that's maybe where I would start. Probably not surprising that you can get really serious as well. The things that cross our desks every day it's real life every day for someone. And so I think my sense of humor is somehow disarming to people. So I think it helps people relax in a situation where we are sometimes talking about some very serious situations. I think it also helps people understand that we don't necessarily take ourselves as seriously as we take our work. And so I think that that matters to me, certainly on my team. I do think it's important to have a team that is different than me as well. So I use my humor to hopefully bring people in. And but have had to change my humor style. It doesn't suit everybody. So I've
Hmm.
had to learn that sometimes the hard way. But I think overall, people know that I think it makes me more approachable. Like I always say, I'm an approachable person, but I think if you can joke with people, I usually disarm people either with humor or with food. So I entice people into my office to not be intimidated because I really do want to hear from everybody. And it's not just words to me. So it's how do I, reduce these barriers. Somebody had shared a good anecdote with me actually around, I always say I have an open door policy. I've been in a leadership role for, now almost like 17 years. So I say I've got this open door policy. And so somebody challenged me with that and said, Laura, you're pretty empowered. And thus, this idea of open door policy makes sense to you. It's something that you would always exercise. You will go and talk to the CEO. You go and talk to whoever really is you want to talk to. But do you think that others have been in a similar situation and thus are
Mm.
feeling confident or empowered or able, or do they see different stakes at hand if they cross that threshold? So I really have been thinking a lot about that around how do you reach, people differently so that they're not intimidated by your title. And Saquib, you would know that. I often forget to say that I'm the CEO when I introduce myself. Um, and I love it when people don't necessarily see me as a CEO and just see me as one of themselves. And so, like I said, humor and food are the two that has helped break down some maybe historical barriers for this office. And it's been actually my pleasure then to get to really learn about people and be able to affect the changes and make the changes that make sense to them, not just to
For
me.
sure, for sure. And so Laura, I mean, you bring out something really cool, which is kind of unique in how you positioned it, which is just because you have an open door policy doesn't mean everyone walks through the door, right? Um, so how have you come to that in different situations?
Yeah, I've learned in this job. So if you can imagine being in a leadership position, some of the things that I think and say and do have been about, all of these years of learning. But it really wasn't until I was in this position that I saw really how many barriers still exist. So I think some of the creativity that comes with this then is like meeting people where they're at. So um, we've been hosting some in the community. Let's get to know each other. I'm going to be at this Tim Hortons. If you think you want to have a conversation, I'm happy to have it, there. I'm happy to have it in your car because we have such a mobile workforce. Everybody has a car, but also it is in their very tight schedules as they're trying to get care delivery where we need it most, and that's in people's homes. And so I guess what I've learned is that you got to meet people where they're at, and that isn't necessarily where you are. I'm a firm believer of, if we think we're going to run, we got to be able to walk together first, and that will bring us further together. It took me some time to believe that, because I'm super action oriented. So it was a hard pill for me to swallow to say, if you say go slowly, it's not something I digest easily. But I think our team is it's important in how we function together, that you could say I lead by example, but I think it's also I really do see it as a groundswell. So, we firmly believe in like the Toyota way. So, in terms of how we function, we do see the solutions at the front line. This is where the service is happening. This is where the delivery is happening. So, I challenge my team all the time to say, like, do you really understand what it means to be in service delivery? And not by the numbers, not by what we see in our dashboards and all of that kind of stuff, but more about what it is to be living a day in the life. And we're launching that program as part of its
Mhm.
own orientation, so that we really can deeply understand and meet people where they're at. And I often take a lot of calls like on the weekend because that's what suits people. They're busy during the week, and I find that just having that openness to say, hey guys, it's a 7-day program. I'm available 7 days. You call me when you're ready. I'm happy to talk to you on my vacation. I'm happy to talk to you on your vacation. Really, because it is this sort of state of readiness that you have to understand in people, and it's not necessarily on a timeline. It's kind of like grieving. There's no timeline for it.
So I mean, the way I've heard this is it's not, open door policy probably was framed at a time when, you know, that's how it was. Um, I think what you're saying is I'm open to meet you wherever you are policy, right?
For
And
sure.
I think that's absolutely fantastic. And you said you have to be creative, and with that creativity, what I'd love to do is get your take, get your leadership take on ingenuity, right? Because again, just as this whole say hi to the future is all about the human side of ingenuity, I'd love to get your take. Um, and as you do reflect on the human side of ingenuity as it relates to you, your organization's success. Give me your take. What's worked? What have you learned?
Yeah, human ingenuity. It feels like an oxymoron against AI.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so, I'm sure everybody's like listening to the different strikes that are going on now with the actors union when we talk about human ingenuity and this idea of creative, and that it can be replicated and maybe somehow easily replicated. I think the caring part doesn't go away. So I'm going to say in a health environment, and I might say healthcare environment, purposely stressing care. I think the ingenuity and the creativity is coming from the moment. And so when I think about think about how like regular healthcare unfolds. There's a bunch of diagnostics. It leads you down this sort of algorithmic kind of thinking to this like endpoint. Um, then maybe I'll say natural endpoint. And I think where I see that kind of go wrong is that not every size fits all. And so I think this is what I try to bring to the front line every day, which is almost regardless of what we've assessed for and where we think care delivery is happening, what it should look like, only you are in the position in the moment to determine what a client really needs, because that's where you are in your journey with them. And so I think that, um, from a compassion perspective, if we make it too rigid, then I don't think people get to shine in doing their best work. And it means for us in human ingenuity that we actually create some space for it. It's not that every minute of every day is fully accounted for, but really gives people some flexibility. An example I have around that is like during the July long weekend, was a Saturday this year. Um, there was a parade happening, and so client care was like, how is it going to happen? And that personal support worker figured it out. Like they're very committed to that care delivery. They know what it means when they don't go. So so as long as we give people the space, they will do the problem solving, because I think they have the right goal and the right orientation to the client, and really to what we're trying to do in our mission, which is enable people to live independently for as long as possible in their homes.
It's as I reflect on the work that Nucleus does, and yes, artificial intelligence and frankly AI is going to be in a lot of the things in just how I'm privy to some of the knowledge that sort of work that you guys are doing, I actually think the premium associated to human side of ingenuity in what Nucleus does will be so much higher, right?
Mm.
So think about it, the compassion part, because yes, you can have the best AI to schedule the right sort of appointments to predict exactly where what care is going to be needed at what point in time, but where the rubber hits the road, right? It has to be the personal support worker, the caregiver, who will be in contact with the person who needs the care. And I think that in itself is going to be that will start to have a much higher premium than what it has had so far. I think there's it's just a matter of time where that compassion is going to be priced at a much higher premium. So you're in the right industry. You're absolutely in the right industry.
I think so. And I think, what we didn't touch on yet is like around the informal, right? There's like a whole bunch of informal support that happens to support people that it is quantified through, through different, federal and provincial reports. But we can't, it's also like what's right for them. And that's actually a really tricky thing to figure out when you're working with informal caregivers and let's say the person who's receiving the care directly. I don't think we can underestimate how much support the informal caregivers need to enable them to have and build good resilience and confidence in what they're doing to support whoever it is that they're supporting. Like we come across that a lot. And it's how do we create the most flexible systems? And you would have known that through our like one of our award-winning programs, the Caregiver Respite Program. It's like a bucket of hours that is given or not given, but people have to be eligible for that. But once they have that, it is on their terms, entirely on their terms. And that's not guided by me at all as an organization. It is what do you need, when do you need it, and we will meet you 100% on your terms. So I think that's where we see a lot of creativity and ingenuity as well as how the system responds to people's needs in their time of need. And really only they can themselves determine that. We can't by our algorithms and all of the things that we do to try to ensure standardized or try to ensure equitable and try to ensure all the things that we need to try to ensure. Ultimately, it comes down to this very customized, personalized, how are you doing today and how can we help you today? So that's, I think, the nugget we're actually trying to crack every day.
And there are quite a few of the different such programs, like Caregiver Respite is one of them. That Nucleus does. I mean, are there other programs that you just want to let our listeners know about
Oh,
that are innovative,
yeah,
that are
there's
different,
there
that are yeah.
Yeah, so we have so our central intake for the community, so in Mississauga Halton region, our central intake called Central Registry is really that gateway for so many programs and services. So caregiver recharge is one of them. So that's really in-home respite. But within that, there's actually a whole umbrella of services to really wrap around people in their homes. And so that is like our Supports for Daily Living program. We work with networks of providers to provide, that care in people's homes. We have our virtual companion call, which is helping to connect volunteers at the University of Toronto. So students at the University of Toronto go through this program, become volunteers, and then are connected with folks who are wanting that kind of interaction. So it's virtual, it's again on their terms, but helps them to combat feelings of isolation, especially through COVID. This is where this program got created, and just seeing so many possibilities for how this now gets integrated in different ways for people who are living at home. And, we always say like you might be living with someone, but you still might be lonely. You might still want to have that conversation with someone who's interested in that you used to play racquetball. And so there's just different things that we are able to now curate a little bit differently for people's interests and also helping them then really feel that surge of energy that comes in having that new conversation and relationship.
I think that's great. So, Laura, I mean, let me go into one specific area because it's just recently that the General in the U.S. has said loneliness and isolation is actually a much bigger killer than smoking, right? Like, that's the level of attention that it's getting, and people who get care delivered to them in their home independently. I think there's a whole concept of dignity that's there. So don't get me wrong, that's there. But how does isolation become a conversation for how care needs to be delivered in a way where that can be addressed? Is there something in addition to the companion link that you talk about? Is there anything else that comes and surfaces, or is that a conversation that you guys are having?
Yeah, so it's a conversation that we now have. So I think COVID was maybe the enabling factor of that to say
Hmm.
that if folks are not getting the same level of care that they used to get or same level of interaction, and that might have only been with care delivery agents, they might be isolated from their family by choice or not, like all of these different sort of scenarios. But it is now something that sits top of mind for us as we introduce ourselves to all of these folks coming in through our doors, because we really are trying to understand not only, let's say, their level of isolation, and maybe conversely then, do they like to do social things, but also, their level of real independence. When we say, are people able to live independently, to really try to understand, are we talking about some elements of recreation that we actually are trying to introduce? And so then creating different partnerships with different organizations to support people to have that kind of experience. But ultimately for us, we see isolation as probably the number one risk factor,
Hmm.
and not only in the way that you've described it, but also, if you are on a lot of different medications for a variety of your different chronic conditions, are you at higher risk for having a fall in your home? Likely. And thus your isolation can now contribute to something maybe a bit more ominous. So I think for us, it's always been top of mind, but this idea of like the social part of isolation versus the physical, medical complexity of it is now creating a much better space for us to talk about it as a point of care delivery, right? Of how
Hmm.
even do we, our PS, our personal support workers and our different, frontline staff, are they even trained? Do they have this kind of recognition? So we talk about that with our colleges and the micro credentialing that might be needed to then really elevate the breadth of what someone who's coming into your home might need in their toolbox.
And it's no different. Every time that you and I have had a conversation, um, Laura is all about the mission, about the care, about let's twist this around and let's bring it back to you, Laura. So, so tell me, you've had a really, really good, storied, well orchestrated career. Um, but clearly, that's not necessarily how you had planned it when you were starting it off, um, where you are right now. So, if you had the chance to retrace your steps, would you do exactly what you've done, or would you take a different path?
So I originally thought I was going to be a tax lawyer. So the reason I didn't go down that road was I thought I would not have very good work-life balance. So knowing what I know today, um,
Maybe a tax lawyer might have been
I
get
might have been a
that.
tax lawyer. But I don't know that I would have had as much fun.
Yeah,
So,
that's fair.
so I think, like, would I do anything differently? I think part of this journey that I've been on was initially trying to curate what I thought was needed to be a good leader. And so wanting enough experience in a variety of different sectors and different roles. I don't know that I would think about that differently. Like
Hmm.
maybe the opportunities that presented might be different. But I really have worked in almost every sector, and like including policy, Ministry of Health, like so I just feel like I've done enough breadth to really be impactful. And I think that's what our accomplishments demonstrate, is that I think when you now maybe have that experience and work in high collaboration. So, that's rarely a me statement. That's often an us statement. Um, I think it lets us do what we really want to do. So, I might now selfishly say that as a CEO, like I really like being a CEO. But have I ever felt like I wasn't the CEO of my own destiny? I always think I have been. So, um, I think my leaders who I've reported to might have said I was a tricky person to manage, because I have my ideas and what I think needs to happen and why. You have to have energy for that, right? You have to have energy for that kind of employee.
and
Um,
and you have that bundle of energy all the time, and that shows up not just in how you lead but also in every person you come in contact with. So that energy is infectious. I don't know whether infectious is a good word to use after COVID, but you know what I mean.
I think
um,
you're okay now.
I'm okay now. Um, One other aspect I'd love to get to know is, now that you've been in this role as a leader for a while, right? 3 years. That's quite a while. Um, what advice do you have for your fellow, um, other CEOs of not just like-minded industry, but also just as a leader? What's some of the advice that you'd give to your fellow leaders?
You always say it, and I believe we live it, which is to stay curious. So, like that, you're never too old to learn. You don't actually know everything, even though you might think you do. So I think that's a big part of remaining curious, is also being able to genuinely ask questions and be open to what you hear. Um, And I think that's probably the nugget, is that if you've created, enough of a trusting relationship, that people will be authentic with you, because you've started that down that pathway. So, I think being accessible is important to any leader. So, um, and I don't think that's just having a great social media profile, for example. So if you take a look for myself, you know that I don't. I really do believe in that social awareness on behalf of the organization makes sense. I think as a leader, you do have to transcend your comfort zone a lot. Um, so maybe don't be comfortable. If you're getting comfortable, I say to my team, and I live that every day. I'm like, if anybody's putting their hand up to say they're feeling comfortable, then we're needing to do something else. I do believe in disruption a lot. Especially of my own leaders. It's what I think pushes us to seek and want and do more, like on behalf of our clients and on behalf of the system. So I think that's an important part for me, is that I do see ourselves as a mechanism to achieve more on behalf of the whole of the system. Um, and staying true to the taxpayer dollar. So value for money is important to me. Um, and that we, as leaders, I think we want to have our clients expect more from us. So I'm going to speak specifically for the health industry, is that this idea of, um, it is what it is because it's a publicly funded system, and thus expect less because of that, is something that I truly just don't believe in. So I want to challenge ourselves to say that we can do it better, and we continue to strive for that every day. And we learn where those barriers are, and we put our energy into breaking down those big strategic, barriers.
Here's what I'm taking away. What I love in so I've heard get out of your comfort zone enough. I've never heard it stated as transcend your comfort zone. I think that is profound. I don't know whether you meant it that way, but it is profound because it's not just about getting out of your comfort zone; it's about transcending. Um, because yeah, so I think that's great. The other aspect, what I'm taking away is, hey, in this industry, for sure, isolation is something that your end client deals with more than what it might be dealt with everywhere else. And I think that's something to work on. Your sense of humor, your way of coming across has been experienced. Your energy is infectious, like we spoke about. Thank you so much, Laura, for taking the time, sharing your insights. Our listeners would love to hear more from you. What we will do is we will tag you and Nucleus in our show notes. So you just might be getting some more call-ins in terms of, hey, can I learn a bit more? But thank you so much
Happy to.
for spending your time.
And thanks for having me. This was, you made it really easy. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak about something I'm really passionate about.
The Say Hi to the Future podcast series is produced by Sonia Romero, edited by Matt Miller, and special effects by Edward Vasquez. Please leave us your thoughts and let us know if there's a guest you want us to have a conversation with. You can find all Say Hi to the Future podcast series on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube.